We got thumbs up. In that case, everybody, let's stand for the Campbell Road version of the national anthem. Those were recorded when this auditorium and this school building were brand new. Fall of 1960, the special time when Sidney High School moved on to Campbell Road. Before we get started, one of the items of business we'd like to take care of is we have been notified by the Ohio High School Athletic Association that the first neutral site football playoff game that will be hosted during the synthetic turf era of Sidney Memorial Stadium will come up next Friday night with a Division II visit. This is the highest division we have ever hosted. We look forward to having a place that Kevin formerly coached, Wapakoneta, playing Tip City. That's the game we'll have here this next Friday night, and we also anticipate activity the following 2 weekends of OHSAA football. So we're very happy with that. We've got a great facility and a great group of people that run it to make it one of the premier places to have playoff football in the state of Ohio. Wow, here we are. This morning I got up, put some finishing touches on my part of this, turned on television to be reminded that today is the 25th anniversary of the Berlin Wall being knocked down. And that happened the night before we played St. Mary's in the rematch at Troy Memorial Stadium. So I remember those 2 days very well. I was, to tie in the history angle of this, and indeed the Sidney City Schools have partnered with the Shelby County Historical Society to spread the word and also sponsor today's event. We do want to throw in the history part, and I remember where I was when the Berlin Wall was coming down and seeing it on television. I was in Columbus. I'd gone over to see the Buckeyes play basketball, an exhibition game, and I was in the lobby of the Holiday Inn across from St. John Arena. If you can imagine this, standing with members of the Polish national basketball team, a Soviet bloc country, watching the Berlin Wall come down, and you didn't need a translator to understand the amazement of those people who were watching that. And then, of course, the next night we got to go to Troy. Everybody remember that? We had some fun. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Our purpose here, 25 years have come and gone since it's turned out it's Sidney's only playoff appearance, but it did result in a state semifinal. You know, in our history, we do not have a large amount of championships, but I tell you what we have had. We've had some great teams. We've got a supportive community that loves its high school football, and they make regular appearances both at home and on the road to follow the Sidney Yellow Jackets. And in 1989 we had I think some of the greatest community support, and it's always good anyway, but it really reached a zenith in 1989 when we made the playoffs and advanced to the state semifinals. We've had great seasons, great teams, and great people. These need to be celebrated. That's why we're here today. Our format, I'm going to walk you through the lead up to the 1989 season. We will go through game by game, all 13 games, and then a brief conclusion thereafter. And we will be at the end of the program. Could I see a show of hands, any 1989 team members out in the audience? Oh, that's super. We'll have you guys come up here a little bit later. We'll hand you a microphone and let you self-introduce. We're very glad that you're here today to join our panelists. Speaking of which, please welcome. Our head coach had a playoff game last night, all the way up in Northeast Ohio, but from the get-go, he thought it was a priority to be here today. Please welcome home Kevin Feld. And immediately to Kevin's right, what can I say other than a lifetime Yellow Jacket, Hall of Fame assistant coach, he's a Sidney institution, our good friend Dan Allen. Look at this, I got to tell you the truth. When Coach Dunges, who is the wardrobe coordinator for this event, brought these jerseys, I said, find a set where we've got 3, 15, and 24. And I said, do that, and get them to match, and then we will hope for the best. And honestly, for what these guys are telling me, they may be a little bit tighter than they look, but Todd, what do you think?
Yeah, these are the 8th grade jerseys, right? These can't be the varsity jerseys. I'm assuming this is the 8th grade jerseys.
Freshmen.
Freshman, got it.
Freshmen. Those are freshman jerseys, but we were true to it. We've got 3, 15, and 24. Chronological order. We'd like to welcome home number 3, running back Dave Kaiser. And I remember one of Kevin's concerns when he became head coach. We've got to find the smallest football we can get a hold of, because the guy who's going to be our quarterback, and he can do some good things for us, has small hands. And he's here today, and we just compared hands, and the status quo is still in place. Please welcome number 15, quarterback Mike Gallimore. And number 24, wide receiver, defensive back, and he also held for place kicks. We had 40 successful extra points by Chris Cotner back in 1989, one of which sent us home very happy from Dayton's Welcome Stadium. Please welcome back Todd Taylor. I want to walk you through this whole thing, and I'll ask some specific questions of the guys who are up here. I'll also invite them when the mood strikes to go ahead and make eye contact or something and interject what you have to say. I would like to begin by finding out what these guys have been doing over the last 25 years. Let's start out with Kevin Fell. Kevin, give us a rundown on what you've done after leaving Sidney.
Well, we were talking here before we started. You know, I was the old coach back then, and now we're all the same age, it seems. So, you know, I was 35 years old when I took the job here, and I was 37 when I left. And I spent 14 years at Lakewood High School, which is up in Cleveland. Technically, I retired as a teacher temporarily. Went back to Wapakoneta for 3 years, taught there and coached football. Probably yell as loud as.
Let me see here.
I have a tendency to talk loud anyway, so.
No, our red button. Try that.
How's that? Okay. I was 14 years at Lakewood High School. I came back. I was a football coach at Wapakoneta for 3. My wife stayed in Lakewood and taught. And at those particular times, it was difficult for people just to move around, especially when your wife has a job. So as fortunate when I went back up that way. I taught in Amherst, which is kind of a suburb of Lorraine, Elyria community, for 4 years. And then the last 4 years I've been the football coach at Elyria. And I don't know how many more years, but probably a few more.
Dan Allen, 25 years. Some of us stay put, don't we?
As most of you know, yes, I have remained here. Went ahead and continued to coach up until 2010 season was my last year as far as with coaching. Retired 2006, and the idea was that by teaching the 8th graders, the middle school at that time, which was also kind of the way that I was able to continue coaching. When Kevin came, some of you remember the articles that were in our going to the state part here. I had been coaching and teaching elementary, and fortunately there was an opening in the middle school, and was able to go ahead and get on the same time schedule, and so continued as far as with coaching and enjoyed it. And then after retiring teaching, I did, as I said, went ahead and coached for another 4 years. Just planned on when those 8th graders were seniors. I did go one more year, and then decided that it was time to maybe let some of the younger folk, all right, go ahead and take over. So,
okay, Dan. Our players, it's very interesting that the two guys on the ends, and we'll start with Dave Kaiser, both live in the Indianapolis area, very close to each other. Dave, what's happened to you since 1989?
You guys hear me okay? All right. Well, geez, after 1989, football was over. I stuck around here and graduated high school in June.
So you made it through those last few months?
Made it through those last few months.
Okay.
After that, I went to college at Ohio State. Spent some time. The three of us spent some time as roommates. After college was over, kind of lost track of, just about these guys and a lot. But met my wife in college. We got married in 1996, and lived in Columbus, Ohio for a few years. Moved over to the Indianapolis area in 2000. So I got 3 boys. My oldest is 15. He's a football player and a running back, similar to me. He's been a lot of fun to watch, and I have 2 other boys, 7th grade and 4th grade, that we enjoy, and enjoy being together as a family and playing sports and doing things together. So, but just to kind of elaborate on Todd, I'd kind of lost track of Todd after college. And I kind of had a vague idea that he was involved with sports in some capacity, and last I heard he was out in Portland or something like that. And then my wife ran into his wife at school, our kids' school, and it's like, yeah. So ended up coming back to work at the Pacers, and so turns out that our kids are in the same school. He lives about, a mile away from me. So it's been kind of nice to reconnect and have a little bit of Sidney in Indiana. So
let's go to Mike Gallimore, who now resides and works in the Dayton area. Mike?
Okay, after high school, went to Ohio State. Had a lot of fun with Dave and Todd, and did make it out of there. Took 1 extra year, but had a lot of fun, like I say. After that, got married, had 2 beautiful little girls, Kennedy and Vegas, right over here, smiling real hard. And they're here today. I appreciate that. From there, went to work with my dad, and did that for several years. And then from there, broke off, started my own business, and been doing that ever since. Like to stay active, working out, and still play some basketball and things like that. But things have been good.
Todd Taylor also comes to us today from Indianapolis. He's been a lot of places in the world of pro sports. Todd, you might just instead of saying that you hung out with these guys in college, let's fast forward a little and get to the point where maybe somewhat by accident you got into the world of professional sports.
Sure. Actually, I prefer not to talk too many specifics about those stories anyway, so I think that it's best left unsaid, although I'll say with Mike it was plenty of fun. Absolutely. I actually went to school at Ohio State, and I sold corrugated packaging once I graduated, so I came back to the area and lived in Sidney, but also sold in Minster. So I actually learned that the Columbus Blue Jackets, or at the time they weren't even the Blue Jackets, but Columbus was being awarded an NHL expansion franchise. I thought that'd be a lot of fun, so I put together a little self-marketing campaign, and lo and behold, I was the first ticket salesperson hired for a yet-to-be-named NHL franchise. So after spending 6 years there, 2 years before we ever began play, so I got to watch the arena go up in downtown Columbus and watch the area be transformed. Did that until the lockout that wiped out the entire NHL season, at which time I went to Portland, Oregon, and spent 2 years with the Trailblazers, and then really found out that that's just too far away. I think at the time I had 2 kids and took my parents' only 2 grandkids 2,500 miles away, so I wasn't extremely popular in my family. But when I moved back to Milwaukee, it's all about perspective. If I would have moved to Milwaukee, it would have seemed very far away, but when you go to Portland and then move to Milwaukee, it seems like you're pretty close. So it's a little tip for anybody moving. After spending 5 seasons with the Brewers, I went to Texas, and possibly the worst timing. I was there between 2 World Series appearances and didn't get a ring. So that's probably timing is another bad lesson there. But ultimately, I was recruited to go to the Indianapolis or Indiana Pacers, where I'm currently over the sales and marketing. And I should say I'm happy that Dave clarified that we are each married and have kids. Jennifer Worms, who went to Lehman, and I have 3 kids, Keenan, Bren, and Ian. From the press release, I think maybe some people thought maybe David and I lived together in Indianapolis. So it was probably very good that he was able to clear up some of those details. So thank you, Case.
Todd, one more thing. The way the NBA schedule has worked, you're in between 2 home games right now, right?
Yeah, and I prefer to forget them. After 2 straight Eastern Conference Finals appearance and losing to the Miami Heat in both games, we actually have 0 returning starters due to injury. So it's been a rough start, but we had a game last night that we played pretty well and lost, and then we'll travel back to Indiana today, and we have a game tomorrow night. So it's a lot of fun, but you know, it's a really hard thing. As Coach Fell will tell you, you can have some really, really great teams, and sometimes things don't turn out, and other times maybe you're not expected to do so well, and they surprise you. So it's an exciting industry to be in for sure.
Okay, let's lay the groundwork and talk some football. Lay the groundwork for 1989. The Yellow Jackets won 13 of 20 games in 1986 and 87. Kevin was hired. I remember going to the press conference, if you want to call it that, and actually the hiring that followed a special school board meeting, July the 5th, 1988. Not too long until two-a-days started Kevin. Kevin, specifically, what brought you to Sidney? And what were your expectations for the football program?
Well, boy, that's a long time ago, Dave, when you think about it. But we were, my wife and I had lived in Delphus, Ohio for 13 years, and we were just looking for a bigger school. I had actually, I had some pretty good teams in Delphus, and I missed a couple of jobs working my way, trying to go up the ladder, so to speak. And basically, they always told me that, well, you know, you're from a little school, and we don't want to take a chance on you. So at the time, I thought, well, this would be an opportunity to go to a bigger school. The Sidney job opened very late. You don't really realize how late it did open. Nowadays, if you look at high school jobs, a lot of them get filled in December. I think I signed my contract to come to Sidney in July, maybe July 1st or 2nd. So it was pretty well established that, you know, what I was going to do was going to probably take a year or so. And our first year, we had a lot of fun. We weren't very good. We played with people, but you know, we were the remnants of a pretty good Sidney team the year before. It was a 7-3 team, and most of those guys graduated. But the one player that I do remember that was still on that team was Jimmy Coverstone, who was about Mike's size, really, and a good little running back. And the rest, everybody else was freshmen or sophomores and juniors. And, you know, and it was really, I think, a tribute to those guys that they took football to be a very important sport here. And, you know, it's just one of those seasons that kind of came together. But, you know, it really didn't just come together. There was a lot of hard work involved getting there. And we could elaborate on that maybe later.
Kevin's first game as head coach, 1988. I want to get the players involved here up at St. Mary's, and I remember this like it was yesterday. We have the ball close to midfield early in the game. It's 4th down and inches. I see some smiles. Mike Gallimore and Dave Kaiser, what do you guys remember about what happened on 4th and inches at St. Mary's? You got an interesting call from the head coach to throw deep on 4th and inches. We did. Kevin, do you remember the call? Danny? I do, and it happened. That's what happens with 25 years, but I remember saying over the radio that night, he's willing to do that near midfield. This is going to be fun. And you know what? It turned out to be fun, but I thought when I saw those smiles that you recalled that right with me. Okay. Okay, hey, whatever. That's what 25 years will do, but that was the first game, a preview of some neat things to come, and we hit a touchdown right there, and we go on a couple weeks later. We had the first victory of the Kevin Fell era. That was at Tip City, historically, on the same night that Tom Browning pitched a perfect game for the Cincinnati Reds. We also won the next week. The 1988 season, as Kevin indicated, we played with a lot of people, and some groundwork got established, but the team finished 2-8. But we knew that a slew of seniors would be returning in 1989. Kevin, I think it was also very important with that returning group that you had a coaching staff that was becoming cohesive.
Yeah, I'll tell you, to start with, it was kind of a situation here where it goes clear back to when I got the job. There weren't a lot of applicants for the job. It was just, it opened late, and you know, I was fortunate. I felt fortunate to get it, but we did not have a real complete staff. Dan was really the only holdover, I think, on the varsity staff at that time. I was fortunate enough to bring Jim Slagle in, who became the defensive coordinator, and the next year we brought Bob Riley in from Miami East, I believe, is where he was at that time. And at that particular time, we had a pretty good core of football coaches. But in order to turn a program around, it really becomes a 12-month-a-year job. I don't think that the guys in Sidney were really used to that. We were all pretty used to that, but we spent an awful lot of time from really Christmas until the first game the next year preparing to play. And I know a lot of these guys out here can remember. I can remember I have some pretty funny moments. I remember we always finished every day with a run. I was a runner. I used to run all over town. And so we'd drag these guys out in the snow, and they'd have their boots on and everything. We'd go out and we'd run around the school for a mile. And I know they thought it was crazy, but you know what it did was it brought these guys closer together. We took them in weightlifting contests and things of that sort, and they started to work out together, work out harder, get bigger, get stronger, and that's all part of the game of football. We did all that. We worked real hard, and we went out and got our butts kicked the first game of the year the next year. So, you know, you wonder about it, but it was all part of the process, the coaches and then, you know, the things that went along with that.
As we go toward the 1989 season, you guys were part of a very deep senior class. All three of you, or any of the three of you, what were your expectations for the 1989 football season as we prepared to open with St. Mary's?
Well, like you said, I just remember working hard. We did do a lot of running, a lot of lifting, and, you know, obviously we had confidence. We had not done very well at all the year before, record-wise, but we were young and cocky and thought we could do well, and so we went out with a good attitude and did our best. Yeah, I do remember losing the first one, but from there we just kept at it, and we had a good coaching staff that, like I say, really helped us and guided us.
I got to back up just a second because I'll let you guys talk. one thing I know that, things slip my mind, but I do remember this, and I'm sure these guys do too. We went over and scrimmaged Lima Senior that year. Or did they come to our place? I think they came to us. Anyway, that Lima Senior team was in the state semifinals that year in Division I. And it was a war. My younger brother, was the offensive coordinator for Lima at that time. And I thought we played them toe-to-toe the whole scrimmage. So I knew we were going to be a good football team. And I think those guys started to realize it too. It wasn't one of those things where, hey, we showed up and we played and they started to win. We felt that they were on the verge of being a good team. And as I said, unfortunately, we didn't start out real well, but didn't mean to interrupt you there, Todd.
No, I was actually just going to point out when they were laughing at me at St. Mary's because they said cover 2, which is how we got beat in that game because I didn't cover the receiver going for the touchdown. So that was why they chuckled right away. They thought they were going to be able to put me in the spotlight right away. So I'm glad you started in 88, not 89.
Well, the St. Mary's game was tied, 14 apiece, very late in the game. And if you're familiar at all with St. Mary's football, it's primarily running the ball, at least when they've had their successes. And this time they passed late in the game through, I believe, right around a 20-some yard touchdown pass that defeated the Yellow Jackets the opening game here in Sidney on opening night 1989, 21-14. You know that St. Mary's is part of the playoff picture when you're in Division II at that time, and certainly that is a blow to the playoff chances right out of the gate. Kevin, you knew that the following week was a chance to right the ship at Bell Fountain, and that's really where the momentum began.
This is my last statement here because I'm going to make Coach Allen talk, but I will tell these guys, I'm sure you guys out there, especially you linemen, remember that we got beat by St. Mary's and we weren't happy, and we practiced. I remember we had Monday off at school, and I know we practiced about 4 hours that day. And we practiced like that all week long. And we go over to Bell Fountain, and, I was apprehensive. About 5 minutes into warm-ups, Chris Cotner caught me right in the head with a ball kick. He knocked me down, knocked my contact about halfway into my brain. And so I basically coached that game with one eye. But we won that game, and then I think by then we were a football team. But it was just, that was the moment of truth, I think, for that season was game 2, because we gotten beat by Bell Fountain the year before, and it was just, we were either going to win then or we weren't going to win, and they came through and they played very well. And now Coach Allen is going to take over. And
Kevin, before we turn it to Danny, I do want to expand one thing on the Bell Fountain game. I remember when we did our radio interview before the game the following week, and we talked about Bell Fountain, who Sidney had just won 34-0. Your statement in that interview I thought was very strong. You said Bell Fountain is a better football team than St. Mary's, and the balance of the games this year will prove that. And indeed, at the very least, Bell Fountain got us a lot of points, and they were a big factor in us getting on to the playoffs, and no doubt about it, we did beat a good football team 34-0.
Yeah, that was a big game for Sidney. We, a lot of that game was vague because I just remember we just had to win it, and I remember, we were coming off in '88 was maybe the hottest, driest, most miserable summer of all time. These guys were juniors, and in that year it started out too. And I remember we went over to Bell Fountain. Before the game, we get there about an hour early, and we're out in the sun. And it was just a miserable, miserable night. So, it could have gone either way. But like you say, fortunately, we're just, got off to a decent start, and there we go.
Coach Allen, you didn't get kicked in the head or anything at Bell Fountain that year?
No, but I think I still kind of, when you brought it back, I remember yeah, of course, we'll get into with Chris Cotner, as most of you would remember. He was definitely a kicker. He had that attitude, and whatever you want to say, and we may talk a little bit more about him later on. And I think it was getting into possibly the next week. One of the things I do remember that we wanted to kind of change things up, I think, and I believe, Kevin, it was either, and again, guys, you know, being in this as long as I try to, hopefully this was with Kevin, but we need to change things up, and I think we decided when we had our home game, we decided to practice and get all of our warm-ups here out to high school. Did we do that with, I believe, one game we did that, and so we waited. And I think it might have been with Toledo, all right, with our third game. So we, you know, normally we're down there, you know, it's at Julia Lamb. We bust from down here. This game we decided to change things up, and we did all of our warm-ups and everything out here. And then when we got in, everybody was, you know, it was like 7:15. We finally pulled into the stadium down at Julia Lamb, you know, and basically got off. And, of course, everybody was wondering whether or not we were actually going to show up or not. And that was also, I think, one of the things I do remember as far as with early in the season that we decided to maybe, you know, lighten things up and change, you know, procedures a little bit there.
Dan made reference to the game against Toledo. That was Toledo-Macomber. Jackets were victorious at Julia Lamb Stadium, 36-20, week 3 of the season. They're nicknamed the MacMen. The MacMen came to Sidney, had a pretty good year, certainly contributed some computer points. The big thing that night was our ground game. Number 3 over here, Dave Kaiser, along with running mate, who was a very talented junior, Thomas Foster. Those two combined for 374 yards rushing that night. And on a night you've got two backs that are splitting duty like that, you're probably not going to lose the football game. And we didn't. Move on from there. There was, in the following week, no trouble with Greenville, a 44-7 verdict. But there was no little brown jug in the series back then because Sidney had actually lost it back in 1971, and it would not be found again for another 15 years. It is back in play now, and Greenville football has gotten better, and we will look forward to bringing that back here within due time. All that time, the little brown jug was in a cabinet at Bridgeview Middle School where we were for all of our home games. It was just a few feet away, but nobody knew it. Okay, that was the Green Wave. We beat them 44-7. Then, moving on in GMVC conference play, a real dandy, and I'll look for volunteers from the panel to comment on this one. Yellow Jackets prevailed at Vandalia Butler. You know, it's starting to look like we got a few wins, we've got some momentum, we've got some teams that will win games, that will posture us at the midseason point as making a move toward the playoffs. Keeping in mind back then, 4 teams per region made the playoffs rather than the current 8. It wasn't expanded to 8 until 1999 rather than 89. So the Jackets won number 4 in a row. This was at Vandalia Butler, but Sidney's up 35-33. Vandalia has just scored. They will try a 2-point conversion to tie the game and force overtime with 2 seconds left. They didn't score. Anybody remember that extra point play? It was critical.
I think I remember it enough. I do remember it stormed that game, and I think we were mostly on the ground that night, but it did come down to a defensive stop, and it might have been Corby or Mark. I'm not exactly sure who in there, but you know, they had a big running back, I think, at the time. He was also a really good baseball player. It seems like most of the people in the GMVC had big running backs or strong guys, and I think they tried to pound it through us, and our guys hit them, and they may have even dislodged the ball from the running back, if I recall. I mean, it was by far an intense play, and I think to Coach Fell's point earlier, at least from a player standpoint, that was sort of the game in my mind that really made me believe we could win. You know, we'd been playing these kids for many, many years since we were in 7th and 8th grade, so to be able to go beat a school like Vandalia in Vandalia on a night that was not ideal was certainly, I think, a turning point for us.
35-33. And we're feeling like we're for real. The following week, a trip to Troy. And we know that's the creme de la creme in our conference. That'll be a real measuring stick as to how things are going at that point. Also realizing that Piqua would follow the week later. But Troy week, right over in the gymnasium across the way. On Thursday afternoon, we had a pep rally. Channel 2 out of Dayton and legendary sportscaster and former voice of studio wrestling, Omar Williams, was with us. He came to Sidney High School to MC the pep rally. We were the TV2 Team of the Week, and I believe there's a plaque signifying that is still in our trophy case. Of course, the one trophy that's really meaningful is up here, the 1989 Regional Championship that we'll talk about a bit later. We struggled at Troy, and we ended up on the short end by a final score of 30-7. Any thoughts from anybody about rebounding after Troy, knowing that we face Piqua the following week? Anybody?
I think it was only 6-0 at the half. They kicked our butts pretty good. They were a good football team. You know, traditionally, you know, you're a Division II football team in Sidney, and you have to play those big schools in that league. And that was a game I thought we gave up. We played pretty hard the first half, and the second half we just kind of got beat. And you know, unfortunately, we had Piqua coming and a few others after that, so it was a tough time.
From there, we play Piqua, and the Piqua series had taken a turn about 10 years earlier. In fact, 1989, of course, is the end of the decade of the 1980s. Piqua has beaten us 9 straight times. This is our last chance to get a win during that decade. We're still looking pretty good in the Division II playoff chase, even after the loss to Troy, but there isn't much doubt that a win against Piqua has got to be on the itinerary if we hope to play further into the month of November. 30 seconds left in the game. Jackets are up 24-17. Piqua is driving toward a potential tie score. They throw to the end zone, and yes, it's caught, but it's caught by number 24 sitting right over here. Todd Taylor, anybody, do you remember that play that sealed the deal against Piqua?
I remember that play very well. For some reason, I can't remember why exactly, but I was in at linebacker on defense. I didn't really play defense much, but didn't Robin Southern. Now, didn't Robin, something happened with Robin, he got hurt or something, was outside to go in for him, and I just remember I had a perfect view of it. The guy was streaking down the side. I'm running, I'm looking right at Todd as he goes up in the air and catches that ball. And as soon as he caught it, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe we just beat Piqua. It was crazy. So.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was obviously it's a highlight of a high school athletic career. I mean, beating our rivals, I don't think we ever beat them in anything that I could recall. So, you know, for me, it was exciting, but I think it was exciting for our entire team, and especially coming off of, I said, the highest point with Vandalia and then the lowest point with Troy when we sort of came back to reality. And then to be able to beat Piqua was another big momentum. So, I mean, it was really just kind of a right place, right time. And I said at the time it was really great coaching by Coach Riley. He was a great defensive back coach, and they had thrown several out patterns, really trying to bait on the out and up. And, you know, fortunately, I think that good coaching helped, and the ball was just inside, and it came down, and I think it vindicated my cover 2 from St. Mary's that I wasn't in properly. So hopefully I got that one back.
You guys have been wearing these jerseys now for about 40 minutes. Are they any more comfortable?
Galley's arms are getting a little purple, but they're
okay.
Yeah, he can't hold the microphone anymore, so I'll be holding it for him.
Dave, I got one thing I know everybody remembers from that game. That was a kind of a special game for all of us. The coach of Piqua and I are good friends clear back from high school, and he's still there. But that was a game that Thomas Foster, I believe, hurt his ankle, and he had trouble with it. Really, I think the rest of the year. I think he probably still has trouble with it, and he talk about it. But that was the game that Kevin Owens came in and played slot back. And Kevin was a transfer from Piqua. And he didn't set the world on fire, but he got 2 first downs in a big drive in that game. And I was amazed because, you know, he was kind of a utility guy. He never really just played just slot back. And he came in and made 2 tremendous plays in that game. And those are the kind of things you kind of look back and see how you win a game like that. But that was one of the bigger wins that year was the Piqua for sure.
Coach Allen, Longtime Sidney guy, it's always a big deal to beat Piqua, but especially when the game had that meaning to our football program.
Oh, most definitely. You know, I mean, that's the thing as far as with the rivalry that, you know, that I had grown up with playing and to be able to, you know, to be in a game like that was going to mean, you know, we knew as far as so much, you know, as well. It was, you know, no doubt, you know, a special. I don't know if the battered helmet was in existence.
Yes, started
you know,
in 74.
Okay, as far as that was always, you know, that particularly as far as it, even with, as in succeeding years, it was always the, that success, you know, that we had, you know, for that particular, you know, trophy was also something that was very, you know, great to go ahead and bring back, of course, as far as to the bus ride as well.
3 games to play, 7 down, 3 to play, and hopefully more to follow. A trip to Trotwood, Madison. In 1989, Trotwood was not yet a solid football team, nor the more dominant team that we've come to see here in recent years. The Yellow Jackets win was pretty comfortable, final score of 31-13. With 2 weeks to go, we had 2 losses, but still, we controlled our playoff destiny. If we win those last 2, nobody can keep us out. Week number 9, the Northmont Thunderbolts come to visit. That was always a win that, if you got it, it was pretty special. And this had some value in the computer points. If we beat Northmont, I think we can probably say that night that we're in. But at any rate, we score with 1:47 to play. We had trailed 21-14, 80 yards away from a tying score. So with that 1:47 to play, Mike went back to throw. Todd headed deep. Anybody remember this one? Touchdown pass. Enables us to...
Mike threw it perfectly, which he was always known to do. He hit me exactly in stride. And it really made it pretty easy because he was always right on the money, perfect spiral every time. So, exactly, yeah. So no, it was just I think it was one of those kind of fun plays. I think it was a post pattern. Mike did throw it in a good spot, and I think it was really cold. If I remember, it was icy. I think our homecoming festivities got canceled, so we had to do the parade around the track and things like that. So I think it was a matter of them probably not thinking we were going to score and not tackling. I wasn't known to break a lot of tackles, so the fact that I did probably indicates maybe they weren't trying that hard. And ended up just racing to the end zone, and then I'm sure you're going to touch on the next spot that we came up a little bit short, but certainly was a fun game. You don't want to say it was a great catch?
It was a great catch. He caught everything I threw at him. So
That's encouraging to know. That got the Yellow Jackets to within 21-20. The logical thing, and the coaches followed through with it, is to send Chris Cotner out there, tie it up at 21. Only thing is, Northmont goes offside. That puts the football 54 inches away from the goal line, and we can win it right there. Kevin, that's what we chose to do. I thought that night it was the right call, but it just didn't quite work.
It was the wrong call, Dave. My recollections of that game are that Friday afternoon, Coach Slagle and I went and rented out about 7 heaters, I swear, from downtown because it was a cold son of a gun. And we got our butts kicked most of that game. And these guys, I can't believe they can't remember because I remember just like it was a slant. It was a 80-yard slant pass. I mean, he stepped inside. It was like a short post. And that was the only thing we did all night. Our defense played great. They hung in there the whole game, and offensively we did nothing. All of a sudden, it's a minute 47, and we got a chance to tie this game up, and I think our only chance is to beat them. And if I do it again, I probably would kick it. I was a little more reckless maybe back then, but for the life of me, I can't remember what we ran. You guys probably know.
Mike ended up carrying the ball on the extra point, and the turf had a problem with the turf. So that concluded the football game. Final score 21-20. Yellow Jackets are 6-3, headed to New Carlisle in week 10, and at this point, the gods are with us. We still, even though you couldn't exactly say that we controlled our own destiny, it was still pretty close to controlling our own destiny. If we go down to Tecumseh and come out victorious, things would look pretty good. In the meantime, another thing that was interesting is Coach Fell had talked about 8 weeks earlier. Bellefontaine has indeed kept right on winning. And I remember broadcasting the game from Tecumseh that night, having an additional radio earpiece in my ear, keeping track of the Urbana-Bellefontaine game, which was one of the outcomes that we needed to go a certain way. And what we needed there was the team that we had beaten, Bellefontaine, to beat a team we didn't play, Urbana, with the idea that Bellefontaine would then get us a few more points on the second level because we had already beaten them, etc. But the other thing is, Bellefontaine has accumulated enough points along the way that we're hopeful that if they win that game and knock Urbana out, we want to be sure that maybe their total doesn't cause us trouble to get in that fourth qualifying position. So at any rate, as we're moving toward the third and fourth quarter of our game, the news starts to get better on the Bellefontaine-Urbana game, and Bellefontaine is winning. So then we concentrate, or at least I start to concentrate more. I'm very focused on what the Yellow Jackets are doing. And in the middle of the third quarter, we're trailing Tecumseh 11-8. And then all at once, we kick it in gear. 26 unanswered points. Final score, 34-11. And I remember, Kevin, you immediately got on, made whatever phone calls you could, and by the time you were back here at Sidney High School, you were confident that we'd made the top four and that we were headed to the playoffs. And at that point, you even surmised that the likely scenario would be, and in those days, the bracket was not automatically set, but the top two of the four teams would both be seated opposite each other. Nobody played at home back then. So we knew that Harrison and St. Mary's would be in separate games. And so what occurred there, Kevin had the idea that would mean that the Jackets would play Harrison probably in the Dayton area. It ended up being at Welcome Stadium. St. Mary's would play Franklin. It would probably make sense to split that geographically and that would end up in Troy. That's exactly what happened.
You're right, Dave. We have to back up a minute because there's a real significant thing that happened that week, and we'll see how many of you guys are actually football guys if you can remember all this. But we made a major change that week. We got beat by Troy. Troy was a wing T football team, and they ran 2 tight ends. We were a 4-3 defense, and a 4-3 defense just does not line up well against 2 tight ends. And we're going into the Tecumseh game, and we're sitting in here. Well, this is the age of the beginning of computers, and we got all this stuff on computers. Coach Riley and myself, and Coach Allen, Coach Slagle, and it just is not working out. Every time we would slide our defense, they had a tight end that was uncovered. And so we invented a new defense. I don't know if Chad's here, but it was the Chad Spillers defense, and we called it the Rover defense. And basically what we did was drop Chad, who was a fullback, and I don't think he played any defense all year. We dropped him in as a rover, as a nose guard who would slide from side to side. And when we would do that, it would give us a 5-3 look. And this not to bore you with technicalities, but we had a monster middle linebacker in Corby Lawson, and we had Clayton and a few of these guys on defense that we just weren't real good with stopping the run. And when we put Chad in there, he jammed up the middle. And from that point on, we were a different football team. And Tecumseh had beaten Troy during the year. So, you know, it was going to be a tough game, but we stuffed their wing T the entire night, and it kept us alive in the playoffs. And believe it or not, that particular defense was one that we used up in Cleveland for probably 14 or 15 years, and everybody would tell us it would never work, and it always worked. And it was invented right here with a bunch of guys that just kind of put something together. And we talk a lot, you know, we have our offensive heroes here that were tremendous players. And add Thomas to that, and we won a lot of games that way. But I'll tell you, the reason that we got where we got in the playoffs was the defense that started to play that week, and it turned things around for us to be a contender. And I never will forget that. I'll never forget that game, and I'll never forget what went on that week, because we found the answer to the wing T at that particular time. And we were able to stop Harrison, and we destroyed St. Mary's, as we'll talk about. And it was all basically because of just adding a kid in there at the right time and making big plays. And again, I don't want to put everybody to sleep with football garbage, but that's kind of what happened.
Kevin, before we go ahead and talk about those 3 postseason games, you brought up the defense, and we certainly do want to give the Yellow Jacket defense its due. You referred to linebacker Corby Lawson. He was in on approximately 13 tackles per game. Quite a football player and a big anchor on the defensive side.
Yeah, Corby was a monster. After the years, I expected when he walked in here today to be about 6'4" and about 250 pounds. And he's down to what he probably was as a sophomore in high school now. But, you know, that's another thing I have to say about the Yellow Jackets. When we play teams like Northmont and Troy, you don't realize how much bigger those schools are and how much bigger their players are. I don't know if it's changed really too much. Dave, you could even say that back in the 70s. I don't think Sidney has ever been known for having big, giant kids that play football. Those guys that played, Dave was one of the bigger kids on the team, and he was a running back. And we just were not a big football team, and I think that's what made it even more amazing that year. They were little, hard-nosed kids. Dwan Ward was a big kid, but he stood out. He was far and away the exception. It was a little, tough bunch of quick kids, and defensively they got after it.
A unique part of that defense, 2 freshman cornerbacks. That's not something you normally see on a playoff team.
Yeah, this too bad Sleg's not here. He could go ahead and go on and on as far as with that. About the 2 young men of Marlon Burns and Tyrone McGee, both of those came well. I mean, it's amazing as far as the development of those 2 throughout that year. And no doubt that was, kind of, a little bit unheard of as far as for freshmen, to go ahead and to be able to move in, as a, starting varsity player as well.
Let's talk to our players. It's Harrison week. We're going to Dayton Welcome Stadium to play in Sidney's first ever playoff game. I get emotional when I think about the community rally on Courthouse Square on that Thursday night. Do you guys remember that, and how special was that for your hometown to send you off like that? Comments?
Looking back on it, I think, it was just an incredible experience. I don't think that any of us, when we started that year, I think that when we started out, I thought, we all thought that we would be pretty good, but I don't think that any of us really, thought or recognized that we could go as far as we did. And I think by the time that, when we made the playoffs, for me, it was just kind of shocking. But just to see the community support and rally behind it was really something special. And I remember that night, down on the courthouse square with all the cheerleaders and all the people, and just the other thing I remember is just all the signs around town, down in all the windows, in the stores. So, anything?
No, I was going to say, I've been fortunate to work in professional sports, and I'll say that, that one moment stands out really well for me, and I think the reason it's so meaningful, especially now with context, is that very few things pull people together the way that sports do. And I think that, not every town gets to do the things that we were able to do. So I think while it was special for all of us playing, we were also young, so it was a little bit wasted on us, and we probably thought it was always going to be that way. But looking back now, you realize there are moments in time in your life that are really, really special, and sometimes you don't realize how special they were. But when you look back, you also realize how special it was for other people. Now that I have my own kids, I realize how special and fun it is to watch them succeed and play. So to have it be parents and friends and families and something that can pull an entire community together, not that it didn't happen on a Friday, but it was something different, it was something special, it was something that wasn't happening in every community, it was our community. And I think, looking back on it, that's a very powerful thing, and I think it's a fun thing to be part of all these years later.
Are there any cheerleaders from that year here? Okay. I owe an apology to that group. I was the MC for the event at the courthouse that night, and I got pumped up, and the band's going with Sidney High, and the cheerleaders got the pom-poms going, this and that and whatever, and the band would finish, and I go, one more time! And these girls are up there, and they do it, and I did one more time twice, so we did 3 back-to-back versions. And by the time that thing was finished, I mean, they're having a rough go. And a couple of them looked over and go, please, please, please. I said, okay, 3's enough. 3's enough. Kevin, I remember that night you actually had started the evening at the league meeting where all league selections were made. You got down in time to talk to the crowd at the end of the evening. And it was a special send-off for our football team. And Dan, having the Sidney overview, will want to hear from both of you regarding that night on Courthouse Square.
Dave, I don't know how you remember this stuff. I
do
remember.
I told my parents it's important.
I will tell you this, though, folks. That pep rally, Dave's being a little modest here. Dave organized, set up, kibitzed the downtown people and everything to have that rally. And I can remember going home and telling Marie, my wife, boy, this is going to be something. It's going to be the football team and Dave and I down there. And I went to the meeting, and I came back, and I went, uh-oh, he's done it again. And there they were, everybody in town's down there, and it was a great night. And I'll say this now, since Dave's here, and we don't have to beat Dave's drum, but, when I first met Dave, it was at a team dinner my first year, and Dave was like, oh, yeah, I played on the 30-0 teams, and I just like to come to the dinners. And I'm like, oh, man, Dave, he's pretty gung-ho. But as I drive around today, and I drive out and I see that stadium, and I wasn't here, but I know Dave had a 90% deal on that. And the fact that he continues to remember things 25 years later, he's a special guy. Sidney's lucky to have him. And that's why I came back here today for sure. I was not going to let Dave down for any reason at all. And while we're here, let's just give Dave a nice round of applause.
Thanks very much. Coach Allen?
That evening, no doubt was extremely special as far as from, growing up, in Sidney and, playing for the Jackets and everything. Of course, as some of the old people know, all right, that we didn't have any playoffs way back, and quite different. And I think, it's one thing that this community, has always been a supportive as far as for, football particularly, all right, but all athletics as well as the schools. And but to see it, to come together, in a, special, situation as far as like that was, truly made me as far as and very proud and so forth.
The Harrison game, let's get specific. One more sidelight. When the downtown event ended, I remember talking to Gary Elsaw, and Gary had one thing on his mind, and Kevin referred to it earlier. With Kevin, Jim Slagle leading the way, the weight program and having good weight facilities became paramount for the Sidney Athletic Department and the Sidney football program. Gary wanted to share with me that night his vision. He said, this playoff situation affords a unique opportunity for us to raise the money and get buy-in from the community and the school district on having a permanent weight facility at Sidney High School. And indeed, that was not only done and completed within a couple years. Beyond that, there was a remodeling and a revamping done within the last few years. That is a great facility, and it serves all of our programs and our physical education very well. The roots for that are located in 1989. Early in game week, defensive coordinator Jim Slagle, before we're getting ready to play Harrison, heads to Cincinnati. Jim, like Kevin, knew a lot of people in coaching, and you got to call on your resources when the time comes. Jim had a buddy down in Cincinnati who was coaching, who'd played against Harrison, and he went down there and looked at a lot of film, asked a lot of questions. It was an undefeated football team. They had a great running back and a phenomenal human interest story, a deaf young man by the name of Ron Peck. And Ron was a fine football player. So Jim did some of the homework there, and we moved on, and we'll talk about the football game itself at Welcome Stadium. The first half, there were a lot of things that didn't go real well. And by the time we get to intermission, we're down 21-7. Kevin, let's talk about the first half and maybe what went on at halftime as we focused on the final 24 minutes of play.
Well, Harrison was the #1 team, Division II team in the state of Ohio, and for a reason. They had a tremendous running back, a tremendous quarterback. We played pretty poorly, but they played worse. They were up 21-7, but if you would go back and watch the film, it could have been 40-7. I know of at least 2 giant plays they had that they got called for holding. They were blatant holds, but still, they had a chance to put us away, right there. Going into the half, obviously, 21-7 nowadays doesn't sound nearly as impressive as it was then. Nowadays 40-0 isn't really out of doubt sometimes, but 21-7 at that particular time was a real butt kicking. And we went into the half basically knowing that we were going to have to change a few things to kind of straighten it out. And we'll leave it there for a sec.
It's 21-14 with 10 minutes, 41 seconds left. The Jackets tie the game in the final minute of play. 21-21, we got to learn the rules for overtime. Got to be a winner. Got to see who goes on and plays next week. Interesting thing is the game that was just up the road had advanced more quickly than ours had. We knew that St. Mary's had already won. If we can pull this off in overtime, we got our rematch from 11 weeks earlier. Goes to overtime. You have a coin flip. Jackets win the coin flip. Only one thing to do. You got to elect to go on defense so you know what's needed. We do that. Harrison gets the football. They score. Then they don't get their PAT. And I think all of us knowing our kicking game and feeling confident that we're going to hit the end zone and make that extra point, we feel like it's time to play St. Mary's. So sure enough, that happened. Dave Kaiser, do you remember the 15-yard touchdown run in overtime? Oh, yeah. How about that?
Yeah, I remember that one.
Take us through.
Really, it was just supposed to be an off-tackle play. Took the ball from Mike, and, the hole was just big enough to drive a car through. I mean, it didn't take it wasn't a great run by any stretch of imagination. It's just pretty much just walking through. But, yeah, they blocked it really well, just like the oceans parted, and just hit and got there. So.
That tied the score, 27 apiece. Chris Cotner and company for the point after touchdown. Todd Taylor, you were the holder. Talk about the PAT.
Well, and even before we get to that, and I don't know how much depth we're going to go to, but it was probably one of the most fun, exciting, craziest games that I've ever played in, and probably any of these guys have, because Coach Fell was right. I mean, at the halftime, I think we were, we were in the playoffs and we're very excited about that. We were playing on the turf for the first time ever. I mean, I remember being out there running around in tennis shoes, and that was really, really cool because we'd only seen it on TV before. So it was a big adjustment for all of us. And then there were just so many flukish things that happened. I've said it before about myself. It was the best, worst game I'd ever played. I fumbled 2 punts, had a 70-yard catch and run that I fumbled to Dewan, who then fumbled it to them. So it was a comedy of errors in the first half, and then in the second, Marlon Burns, who you mentioned earlier, made probably one of the greatest interceptions that I can remember seeing, returning it all the way back and being critical. If he doesn't make that catch, we have no shot. And really, the extra point in the end, I think by that time we had all convinced ourselves we could win. It was really the extra point to tie it that was the most nerve-wracking, and I think Chris Cotner was going to tie and then break your record that you had set from kicking PATs. So there was the added pressure of trying to keep Chris Cotner calm. I think Coach Allen mentioned earlier he was definitely a kicker, so he was about 12 on a scale of 1 to 10, so we had to bring him back down and get him centered to be able to kick it. And then really by the time we got to overtime and Kay's running it through there and scoring, I think there was no doubt that Chris was going to hit that extra point.
The ball is down, the kick is up, and we're playing St. Mary's. It happened. And the St. Mary's crowd was already headed from Troy back home. A lot of them, we found out, were listening to the broadcast as the Yellow Jackets won the football game. Any other Harrison thoughts?
I got a couple because I know you guys have had enough of me, but
oh no, that's why we're here.
It is one of the better football games that's got to be in Sidney history because it was a great turnaround, and there were so many strange things that happened in that game that even today I can remember virtually every play of that football game, and I can remember that there was a 4th and maybe an inch that they were going for, and Corby basically grabbed their quarterback and threw him back, and he never even got an inch. And that was a big turning point. I believe we were down 21-14 at the time, and we came down, and they were so good. And I was talking to Jason Wygant about this before the game, or before we went out here. They were so good that we went down, and I called a timeout, and we were on about the 3, and I looked at Mike. I said, Mike, we can't score yet. I said, we score, they're going to come back. And so we stalled it out. We told Jason to fall down on the 1-yard line, and he did. I said, we're going to run the same play twice. And I remember when he fell down, I remember some guy in the crowd goes, what are you doing? And I'm thinking he's doing exactly what we need to do because we ate up enough time. He scored the next play, and it was time, to tie it up. But in overtime, and I will never forget this because it was one of those games where it was about, I don't know, it was probably 25, 30 degrees. And I remember when the kid, it was a big kid too from Harrison, missed the extra point. I knew we could score. I looked over at Chris Cotner, and not to pick on Chris, but Chris had on bear paw mittens and bear paw feet because he was trying to keep warm. And I'm thinking, okay, there's the guy that's going to do this. And Dave took it in, scored. Chris shook off all these paws, went out there, kicked the extra point. And I think it changed his life because I think from that point on, he was a very confident young man. And it was just one of those games. We were jumping around, leaping around. Everybody was happy, and they turned the lights out. All of a sudden, we're all in the dark, and we went on to St. Mary's. But it was it is never going to leave my memories because it was just one of those games that you just couldn't believe you won it.
I think that's the thing. I think with Cotner, I think they talked about icing the kicker. Well, there was no way. Then the case with Cotner, you're going to go ahead and ice him. I mean, it was a case. I'm trying to think. I believe he was out. During their timeout, he's out there doing cheering up, doing jumping jacks and whatever. And of course, I don't know if I think we still remember as far as with that during that year that Kevin goes ahead and says something to Chris. We're down on on the end of the ball game. We're down by 4. What are we going to do? And Cotner goes, hey, I'll go in and kick, lose by 1. I mean, it's just. It was him, and so I think we all felt, fairly confident after we went ahead and, after they missed, we realized that we were going to go ahead and go on.
We go on and play St. Mary's, the game at Troy Memorial Stadium, regional championship the winner gets that trophy. And that trophy's been here for 25 years. 11 weeks after the disappointment on opening night, we've got our rematch. Sidney is buzzing. Folks are excited. Great crisp fall night for football at Troy Memorial Stadium. St. Mary's scored first, but not again. A great defensive effort. Comments about the defense, the overall effort on that particular night?
Well, those guys all played it. There was a lot of things again that week. I can go back to the beginning of that week when a good coaching friend of mine, Jerry Beauty, who's at Defiance High School, at that particular time, I think he was still at Defiance, he said they just had their league meeting, and the consensus was that we had no chance against St. Mary's. And they said St. Mary's is tremendously well coached. They have an old coach. He's like 50 years old. And it's hard to believe that Skip was younger than I am now. And I looked at him like he was the oldest man alive. He'd been down there. He'd won state championships later, not then. And you know, the consensus was we had no chance. We played well. Dave must have had, I don't know, we had 220, 230 yards, something ridiculous. He was running wild that night. I remember at the end of the game, they cheap shot him out of bounds. Got my first and only 15-yard penalty ever as a head football coach, screaming at the officials at that particular point. But defensively, we played great. But I will say this: their best running back, I can't remember his first name. His last name was Keith. He was Floyd Keith's nephew, I think. He had an ankle injury, and they were saddled with a bunch of sophomores who went on to lead them to like 2 or 3 state championships later. But at that particular night, we were the better team, and it was a thrilling moment for me, and I think all of us. We were happy to be there and win a championship, but we didn't know any better. We figured we belonged there, so good for us.
Coach Allen, St. Mary's through our time as Yellow Jackets has been a big opponent for Sidney. Never bigger than it was that night.
Well, most definitely, Dave. I think as far as in the case, we talked about with Dave, getting this, the number of yards that he did. I mean, of course, as a good old offensive line coach, no doubt, and I'm sure that, that's one thing that my, group, realized that if, they did their job, everything was going to go ahead and fall in place. And it was a situation where, we, a lot of times those young men didn't get the name in the paper, and that type of thing. But no doubt it was a special group that we've always had there.
28-7, the final score. In those days, playoffs just a bit shorter than they are now. Our next game, as we were regional champions, is a state semifinal. And we're going to play undefeated Fostoria. However, we're 9-3, and we got some momentum. The site for the game, the Toledo Glass Bowl. AstroTurf, which we had also played on at Welcome Stadium. It had rained that week, and I believe there was some freezing in the AstroTurf before the rain had a chance to make its way through the surface. So it made for an interesting playing surface on that particular night. State Division II semifinals, it was frigid. What were your thoughts, you guys, going onto the field that night? Here we go, we're in the state semis.
It was really cold, and the and the field, as I recall, was more of an ice rink than a turf field. It was really cold and really slick.
Yeah, that's all I remember as well. It was cold to try to hold the ball and pass it and work with it. It was bad, and to try and tackle their big running back and was even worse in the cold.
I don't really have much else to add other than I think the whole week was bad too because we practiced inside in the gym and it was just an unusual week, but it was a long bus ride and a lot of fun and really until we got into the game and then maybe it wasn't so fun toward the end.
Fostoria ran a different version of the I formation. They would often stack 3 guys behind the quarterback And the guy who was at the rear end of that went on to be a fine running back at the University of Toledo, Casey Macbeth. And on that particular night, he ran 47 times for 296 yards. That's an average of almost 6.5 yards per carry. I'll make one observation. If they keep running him in some vital situations, I'm not sure we're as close as we are at the end of the ball game. Straight ahead out of that triple I formation, they were awfully tough to deal with, but it seemed like when it's 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, whatever, they'd try to go wide, and we could knife through and stop that. Any thoughts on that from our coaches, remembering any of the play selection from the other side, or anything about the fact that the game remains tight through much of the contest?
Oh, I have a couple of thoughts for sure. One, I got lost. For some reason we dressed at Savage Hall, which is their basketball facility, and I had to do an interview. I have no sense of direction anyway, and it was dark, and it's raining, and it's snowing. I couldn't figure out where the team was. I think I finally got to the team as we were going out on the field. But in that game, Chad Spillers broke his thumb midway through the first quarter. We had to kind of glue it back on practically to finish the game. But the big thing about that game was at the end of the game, we're still hanging around. And it's 17-14, they're ahead. And they got to go 80 yards. And I think at least 3 times they were 4th and 4, 4th and 5, and Macbeth just drug us for a first down. And we finally did stop them. And Mike and Todd, I know, hit 2 passes at least, and we just ran out of time because we had a shot at them at the end. I think we were sitting on the 20, getting ready to score, and I think we might have run out of downs, but I think we ran out of time. And they were a better football team than we were. We played with a lot of heart, played hard, and it was a tough way to go out. But when you're a team of like we were about done. We were this was week 13, and we were all bunged up. We had Thomas was still limping, I know, and like I said, our defensive guys were running out of dudes, and it just got to the point where they laid it on the line one last time, and that team, that Fostoria team, as you say, the play calling. I know the one thing that kept us in the game was Derek Kidwell was the sophomore quarterback, and his dad was the coach, and they were bound and determined to have him throw the ball in the end zone. And they'd get down there 3rd and 3 and throw the ball out of the end zone a couple of times. We were still in the game, and so yeah, we benefited from that a good bit. But it was a great game, probably one of the toughest physical games that I can remember, and I was just tremendously proud of our guys.
Coach Allen, talk about defending Casey Macbeth.
Well, trying to think right now as far as on what no doubt it was we knew that going in, all right, that was the one that we had to stop, and it was just a case of, trying to go ahead. I don't know if we had, what all of our keys were based upon him, and whether that was part of their thinking as far as with, changing things up, a little bit, onto that. But, even the case, like Coach mentioned, as far as with, we had 3 or 4, and he was just that strong, at that particular point to carry us for another 3 or 4 yards.
5:21.
We'll mention one thing though, Dave,
as
far as we talked about, banging, getting everybody as far as onto that. As of course at that particular time, we didn't have a certified trainer except for me, and so it was a case of common sense type of things. I know that we had our student trainers, but it was a question as far as some common sense type of things. I know Thomas probably, still remembers as far as with his ankle that I always had 2 good buckets, one for ice and one for hot, and we did, I don't know how many times we went ahead, and these guys would, no doubt complain as far as onto that. But as Coach said, we were no doubt about done, because I know that I was plenty busy trying to, a lot of times keeping the kids together to go ahead with another week.
So you were not certified by the Wilson Memorial Hospital training program? No. Okay. There we go. With 5:21 to play, we're down 17-7. We talked about things, and Dave ran in from 83 yards out, and all at once it just hits me, and I'm sure hit a lot of our fans there. It's 17-14. We're in this thing, and we had the opportunity that Kevin described late in the game, but 17-14 was it, and there was no more scoring. And the 1989 football season ended up on the frozen turf at the Toledo Glass Bowl. We were right there. And when I say that, I also say it from the standpoint that the following weekend, Fostoria goes to the state championship game. Ironically, the last time it was in Columbus 25 years ago. And they hang right to the end with the eventual state champion, Clark Kellogg's high school, who was in the volleyball tournament over the weekend, Cleveland St. Joseph. They were the D2 champion, and Fostoria played with them right down to the end. So we were right there in 1989. When we say state runner-up, that's no accident. That's the level at which the Yellow Jackets were playing. To close it out, before we bring the other team members up here, any reflections anybody'd like to share from our panel?
No, I guess it's already been said, but to sort of summarize, I think it could be any three other people sitting up here. You know, I think that's the other thing that I've really learned and I've taken with me as I go. It really does take an entire team, and we had people that were able to step into roles, and really, I think that's what's special looking back on it is you don't always have to be best friends and hang out all together, but if you have something that's special as a group of people that want to accomplish something, it can certainly happen. And as I look back on that, undersized and probably not the best athletes around, we had a great coaching staff, and I think that there was more hard work. We jokingly said in the hallway, the first time we complained about running 600-yard sprints followed by 660s and then 640s, only to find out that 2 weeks later, Coach Feld changed it to 10, 10, and 10. So we really worked hard all the way through the end of the year, and it was really a very special time looking back on it. And again, I've been able to experience a lot of things in the professional sports world, and certainly that 1989 year and teammates, and just looking back on it is certainly probably the most special thing that I've ever been through. So I thank you for having us all back. I certainly appreciate it, and it's good to connect with people.
Mike, anybody else?
Yeah, we had a great group of guys, and like Todd was saying, yeah, we weren't the biggest, we weren't the fastest. You know, we happened to be quarterbacks and running backs, but everybody worked hard and worked together. You know, we had good coaches who believed in us, and it takes a while to, like I say, 25 years is a long time. So thinking back to a lot of this, it's hard to remember. It'd be neat to watch the old games and refresh yourself of what was going on. But a lot of good memories, a lot of funny stories of things that happened during the game that kind of pop up and we're giggling about up here. But really appreciate you guys doing this and taking the time to recognize us.
Dave?
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day, and I think that, you know, when it really just came down to it, we were just a bunch of overachievers. We just worked really hard and overachieved, and I think that was great. But going back a little bit, I think the things that kind of come into my mind were just, you know, a lot of the camaraderie that we were able to have and go through. I mean, in particular, I was thinking about, you know, just the good times singing the fight song on the bus home after the game, after any of the games, you know, coming back and pulling into the school and singing the Sidney fight song at the top of our lungs. It's just, you know, those are the things that stick with me. Just, you know, as much as winning and winning the games, but just being part of something bigger than yourself, being part of a great group of people, and being able to, you know, really just overachieve and you know, and get something out of it. So for that, I'll always be grateful, and I'll look back at that with a lot of, you know, great fondness. So,
Coach Allen?
I was sitting here just thinking, as far as in the case with, you know, again, I'm kind of particular as far as with and partial to our linemen, and I know that Tom Wiseman and Grant Mullins was out there. I was thinking Danny Broderick, and you know, we, even as far as think back at You know, a lot of times that talk about undersized, but we were definitely, as far as, you know, hard workers, probably one of the reasons why I stayed in it for so long. These young men that, you know, I've had the opportunity and wish to coach, you know, is probably, you know, no doubt, you know, one of the reasons that I, you know, stayed with it for 39 years. But, yeah, these, you know, it was just, you know, truly amazing as far as what, you know, these young men were able to accomplish. And, you know, what I think is looking at sometimes the picture too, as far as we had an awful good group of youngsters. You know, we talk about the juniors, you know, seniors, but juniors and sophomores to provide, you know, practice-wise, and that was the other thing I think that we also, you know, helped us, you know, no doubt as far as for this success that we had, and kind of the thing that we like to, you know, hopefully we'll get back, you know, the point as far as with, you know, years to come, that, you know, get the youngsters to realize that, you know, they're going to develop, you know, as well. So, but definitely appreciate everybody showing up, you know, and thank you.
Coach Kevin Fell.
Last night when we finished up our season, I told our kids something that I think I learned from these guys, and that is, I said, 15 years from now, you're going to look back at high school. You're going to remember some of your girlfriends, and maybe you'll marry them. You're going to remember some of your teachers. But I said, you're always going to remember your teammates. You're always going to remember all the guys that you went to school with, what you did during a football season, whether you win or lose. I said, if you lose, you can always lie about it 10 years from now. Nobody's going to know. But these guys don't have to lie. These guys have something special. But they're like all teams. They enjoy each other. It's an amazing feeling to be a teammate. It's amazing, as Dave mentioned, come back on the buses. This has always been one of my favorite teams, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. Again, thanks a lot, Dave.
Let's go ahead and bring our guys up on stage who were team members from 1989. Line up side by side across the front. Mike, I'll put you in charge of making sure that microphone is live once they're all up here. Started on this end. And just hand it across the way, and we'll let each one of them identify themselves. We've got even more here than I realized, which is wonderful. A number of these guys were present at a regular season game, I believe the Piqua game a couple of weeks ago, and took a bow out on the field at the end of the first quarter. We've got a full complement here.
Looks like you're going to start it.
Sean Leslie. Jason Wygant.
Tom Wiseman.
Grant Mullen.
Seth Allen.
Danny Masteller.
Todd Cagle.
Corby Lawson.
Clayton Westerbeck.
Shane Moore.
Jason Colley.
Ron Swartz.
Thomas Foster.
Mark Elliott.
Chad Spillers.
Chad Allen.
Let's hear it for those guys. Thanks very much. If you'll head back out into the audience, we've just got a couple housekeeping items to finish. And we can do some photo opportunities when we're finished. Not going to kick everybody out of here right away. Thomas Foster, I'll say one thing very quickly about him. I remember when Kevin moved on and his team in 1990 up at Lakewood, Ken Barhorse called him from the Sidney Daily News to see how the team was doing, and he had a very quick observation. He says, I'm one Thomas Foster away from having a great team. And I thought that was neat. And Thomas indeed did have one more great year with the Yellow Jackets. You know, thanks to everybody, the panel, Kevin Feld, Dan Allen, numbers 3, 15, and 24 chronologically, Dave Kaiser, Mike Gallimore, Todd Taylor, all the teammates who've shown up. Sidney Athletic Director Mitch Hoying was a big help on this. When I went to Mitch and I said, we cannot let this season get by without commemorating this 25th anniversary, he had total buy-in. Next thing I know, we're talking to another guy we want to thank, Damian Skeens upstairs. Damian is the auditorium coordinator here at the high school and also works with us on game nights out in the press box and teaches TV production at Sidney High School. This event has been taped and he'll be, we believe, if everything goes the way we hope, coordinating a final video product that will be shown continually, have it available through YouTube, not only on YouTube, but also on yellowjacketfootball.com, which is a website coordinated by assistant football coach and Sidney High teacher Greg Snyder. So thanks to you, Damian. Also, head coach Adam Dunges, he's a guy who buys in with the idea that we've got a great heritage, we need to buy into it, and he also was the wardrobe coordinator for today's event. Don't worry, those are about to come off. Just got a few more pictures to take. Also like to thank ongoing in Sidney, the tremendous support for football, people who come to the games, the Vespa Quarterback Club, the Sidney Football Moms. It helps make our operation pretty special. Also, all of those who spread the word about this event, everybody who came out this afternoon and attended. We appreciate all of that. And just in a nutshell, this has been a trip down memory lane that I have enjoyed, and thanks to all of you as we shared it together. Good afternoon, everybody, and before we quit, I talked about Coach Dunges. He rescued these. These are circulars that appeared in the Sidney Daily News the week that we played Fostoria back in '89, and he just found them somewhere here at the high school. He looks at them and he says, we're only 2 years away from the 25th anniversary. I bet we'll need those. So everybody on stage has gotten one, and if anybody would like to request one, I just don't want to pass them out and waste them, but I'll have these and I'll be available for anybody who would like one who maybe didn't save theirs from 25 years ago. We do have those headline in the supplement, we're going to the state, and indeed we did. And that's why we've been here today. So we'll do that and take a few pictures and mingle a little bit. Thanks everybody for being here today.